Today we are going to discuss some rumors, some news and notes around the team, and then talk about the ceiling and floor for your bullpen in 2024, all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, January 8th, 2023. Almost got me. Almost caught me slipping. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASEmedical.com, and you can use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your order. Okay, welcome back. Happy weekend, everybody. Hope that it was fantastic. Long weekend for the program, unfortunately. Like I told y'all last week, just a really busy and difficult week to squeeze stuff in. Last week I was out of town, down south with some family, traveled back on Sunday. I'm currently recording this on about 3 hours of sleep. So if I get something wrong, I'll fix it on Wednesday's show. All right, just bear with me through it. But I don't want to miss 2 days in a row. I didn't even want to miss on Friday. I just literally couldn't find any time. But I'm back home now, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube. And so we will be regularly scheduled programming from here on out. Exciting times, obviously a slow part of the offseason, but we're hitting that kind of like over the hill where, if it was like the Top Thrill Dragster, right, at Cedar Point. You're hitting that downward slope. There's not a lot of movement at the very top, and then you hit that, and then you hit the ground running. We're about a little over a month and change probably from pitchers and catchers reporting. Now we got news every day to talk about. Well, spring training is going to be a ball. It's going to be a blast. Before we get into the ceiling and floor conversation, which I really like, the best and worst case scenario type of thing that we've been doing with different positional groups. We're going to do the bullpen today. Later in the week, we'll do the offense as a whole. I also want to do the defense. I'm trying to game plan and figure out if I can get an entire show just off of team defense and what best and worst case scenario for defense is. There's a lot of metric stuff that I would want to go over. There's also a lot of conversations just about who plays what position given each scenario. So I'm trying to game plan that, still prepping for that, figuring out if I can get a full 30 out of that. We definitely can get a full 30 out of today's show. Before we get into the bullpen, like I said, we're going to start off by talking about a couple of rumors, just addressing them. It's more of me being a Debbie Downer. Not even right. I don't think it's a downer as in poor Tigers, we're not going to do anything else. They've made moves. It's more so just there are some people that are optimistic that one of these things is going to happen. I don't see it really happening at all. And then there's another one that scares people, and I also don't think that one's happening at all. So really, it's just me looking at 2 rumors that have been reported and kind of just saying, I don't really see it to either of them. The first one of those being Tarik Skubal. We have had a long history of talking about Tarik Skubal and the possibility of him being traded on this program. It dates back probably about a year now. When I first brought it up, I think most people were somewhat angry at first. But then he was hurt, so then it was kind of okay. And then he was literally, we talked about this on Wednesday's episode, the best starting pitcher in the game of baseball by most metrics from July 4th, when he made his first start of the year coming off of injury, until game 162. So the entirety of the timeline in which Tarik Skubal pitched, he was the best starting pitcher on the planet. And he's a lefty, and he has team control, and he can throw 100 and has 5 different pitches. He is electrifying, and I think that quickly changed my tune, certainly. I went from much more of a risk-reward, I don't want to give him up for nothing, but if someone pays a lot, then how could you not type of thing. And that quickly went from this better be a disgusting overpay for me to even entertain. And the report that came out, the wording didn't even make it really, to me at least. There's a report by John Heyman that involved it. There's a couple of more. It wasn't even like, oh, they're listening to offers on Scooble. I feel like even if you hear that, even if you hear, oh, we're listening to offers on somebody, you kind of go, all right, like, that doesn't really mean anything. And this was even less than that. This was, I'm trying to remember the terminology they used. I want to say they said listening mode. Pretty sure was the report. Like, what does that even mean? What mode? Like, I genuinely, like, what does that even mean? I am of the belief, and this is not a very long conversation for this reason. I don't think Tarek Skubal is getting traded, and if he does, I think it is going to have to be a disgusting overpay, a just redonkulous overpay. And the reason why I don't think that's happening is because I don't think that lines up in a trade deal, right? You have the Tigers who believe that at his peak, he can be an ace for this team going forward for the foreseeable future. And on the flip side, you have somebody who's trading for that talent, obviously, but Tarek Skubal has had a littered injury history dating back to college. Tommy John at Washington, right? Slips in the draft, has a good draft year, but slips in the draft still because of it. Is a professional then, and has had in every year of his Major League Baseball career an injury happen, right? Or has been on serious innings limitations. So I don't think that lines up. I don't think there's a team out there that's willing to grossly overpay for somebody who has yet to prove that they can stay consistently healthy. And I don't think the Tigers want to get rid of him for anything less than this is an ace with years of team control left. So I don't think that lines up. I don't see this happening. If it does, I say it all the time. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. We'll talk about it if it does happen. I want to put people at ease as best as I can because I'm not worried about that in the slightest. And this is coming from me, somebody who everybody got mad at last July before he kind of went supernova there and turned into what he turned into in the second half of the year and was somewhat entertaining listening to offers on him a little bit more seriously. I don't think too many people are left on that boat. I don't think the Tigers are on that boat either. Next, JD Martinez. There was some reports that the Tigers may have some mutual interest in reuniting with JD Martinez to play DH. Evan Petzold of the Free Press very quickly shot this down. MLB Trade Rumors wrote an article about it as well, citing Evan Petzold in the article, where everybody on the Tigers end is pretty much like, I don't think that's right. And I join that crowd. We've talked about it a lot, which is why it's kind of a short note at the beginning here and not a full conversation. As far as I'm concerned, the Detroit Tigers, being Scott Harris and AJ Hinch, are thrilled, over the moon thrilled about not having one person guaranteed in the DH spot night in and night out, right? They're finally, I don't want to say getting rid of, because that makes it sound like it's like a negative connotation towards Miguel Cabrera, and obviously he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but they are finally rid of a log jam, just like this guy is your DH every day, no matter what. And I think that they're very excited about that. I think that they want that. I think they welcome it. I don't think they're about to go out and get another player that only plays DH. I think they want the roster flexibility too much to bring in somebody like JD Martinez. Now, again, if it happens and I'm wrong, then we'll talk about it, obviously. But where I stand, I don't think either of these things are happening. Okay, cool. Busy weekend around baseball, though. And we'll kind of have an off-season recap, non-Tigers edition as we get closer to pitchers and catchers reporting and all the moves that are going to happen are done. There's still some big name free agents out there. Obviously, Imanaga, don't think the Tigers are in on him anymore. I think his price is getting a little too high. You're getting into well over 100 mil, it sounds like. You got Blake Snell, obviously, still out there. That's certainly not happening in Detroit. So we got some more big moves before we get to the offseason recap, fully type of episodes, but definitely on the horizon, we'll say. Okay, let's move on and talk about the bullpen. All right, we will do that right after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up. Fantastic Week 18 this past weekend, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 moneyline bet. That's $150, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. So many different ways to bet as well. You have live same game parlays. You have finding bets on the new Explore tab, which is super cool. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, and that's the best way to find popular parlays around that a lot of people are joining in on. It's very, very cool. And again, given where the NFL season is at right now, there truly isn't a better time to get in on the action. So visit FanDuel.com right now /lockedon to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Wednesday. Again, regularly scheduled programming. I apologize greatly for Friday. Just genuinely didn't have any time to do really much of anything. But we are back home and ready to hit the ground running here. So let's talk about the bullpen. I'm trying to think, is there any other news and notes? There is a small legal matter that the Tigers seem to be involved with. This came out a week and a half ago-ish, almost 2 weeks ago now, that a pair, or it could be more than, it's not quite clear, but a group, will say, multiple, that's probably the best way to put it, former scouts are suing the Detroit Tigers, saying that they were released and fired because of their age, and the Tigers wanted to bring in younger scouts to replace them. They're attempting to sue. We will see what happens there. I'm not a lawyer. Was not in the rooms either. I don't know the intentions of these scouts and if there was intention behind it. So this isn't like a big conversation. It's also not really a huge news story just around. It was the day it came out, and it's quieted down a lot since. I'd imagine it's not going to be too loud of a story just because these scouts were fired at the end of the 2020 season. There's so much regime changing since then, right? Like, this wasn't like last year, or this wasn't like in the Scott Harris or even AJ Hinch era. This, at least this first group, if I don't know if there's multiple or not, but these people were fired at the end of the 2020 season. So we'll see what happens, but it is news happening in the Tigers, and I felt the need to talk about it no less. Let's talk about the bullpen. It's our big conversation of the day, the Detroit Tigers bullpen. I want to start, honestly, with like how we got to where we even are. And we've had this conversation a few times, so if you're an everydayer, this might be a little redundant. Earlier in the offseason, I know we had a very similar conversation just to like how we got to where we are with the bullpen. And it's so fascinating to me because in 2022, right? So you're talking, well, 2 years prior to this soon-to-be 2024 season, the Tigers had a good bullpen. It was one of the only things that went right in the 2022 season. You had the four-headed monster of Gregory Soto, Andrew Chafin, Michael Fulmer, and Joe Jimenez. And then on top of that, you had Alex Lang called up in the middle of the season, and you had Jason Foley, and you had Tyler Alexander, who was having a good year. Like, they had dudes in their bullpen, and they were just, like, sad to say, but wasted on a team that was an absolute train wreck offensively. And so they did well, and it was pointed out by a listener at the time that, like, how hard is it to be a good bullpen when you never have a lead? Fair point. There's a lot more metrics nowadays that are trying to encapsulate the value of a pitcher in a high leverage situation. It's kind of like I don't want to say the new wave, but there's a lot of new stats that are trying to come out or trying to gain ground and that are trying to articulate and show how good a pitcher is in a higher stress or higher leverage situation. So that's fascinating and is something that we will certainly take a look at throughout the season. There's a couple of people amongst the Tigers media community that are already kind of all over it. I know Jerry, who writes for Tigers Minor League Report and whatnot. Fantastic follow on Twitter, by the way, if you don't. And he's been all over kind of like the leverage stats for a while. Yeah, great follow. Very insightful, very smart human being. Awesome dude. So We'll talk about that kind of throughout the year, but that transitions into this year's bullpen because that year's bullpen had a ton of high leverage guys, right? Gregory Soto, I know I say high leverage guys and then Gregory Soto, and then half the fan base immediately starts screaming bloody murder at me just for insinuating that Gregory Soto might not have been as bad as you thought. I'm sorry. It's probably the truth. Obviously not for everybody, but for some people. I mean, I remember, you know what? I fought the good fight for Gregory Soto. I really did. The amount of debates and conversations and nasty comments that I got just for, again, possibly insinuating that he wasn't like a DFA worthy pitcher is preposterous. So he was a guy that, love him or hate him, at the end of the day, he didn't blow saves, right? He only blew a couple of saves across like 2 seasons before his final year in Detroit. And then things got obviously shakier that year, but he had a multiple season stretch where he was not blowing saves at a very high rate at all. And it was, kind of Todd Jones roller coaster-esque, but he was closing the door at the end of the day more times than not, much more times than not. But then even if you're like, no, like, screw you, kid, like Gregory Soto sucked, fine. Joe Jimenez had a career year in 2022. Michael Fulmer had a career year when they finally moved him full-time to the bullpen in 2022. Andrew Chafin had like 2 or 3 career years in a row, essentially, 2022 being one of them. Then you had young Jason Foley, who was like a first out of the pen guy, but like was really solid in that role. And so then the old adage of what use is a good bullpen on a really bad team was in effect. And the Tigers said, not at all, bud, and traded away or didn't re-sign everybody, right? At least of that 4-headed monster, right? They were all gone. They were all either traded or not brought back. And so they go into 2023 with obviously Foley had to step up into a much bigger role. Alex Lang had to step up into a much bigger role. There's a couple of smaller pieces, right? Tyler Alexander, we talk about, that we're going to have to be more prominent in the bullpen. And this season was, I think, not bad, is kind of how I want to say the 2023 bullpen was. They ranked around 14 to 20 in most team bullpen metrics. You want to look at bullpen WAR, they were about 20th. You want to look at bullpen like FIP and XFIP, they were closer to 13, 14, 15. ERA, 16, 17. So depending on which metric you like most, you can kind of form your narrative a little bit, but they were never in the top 10 in anything, and they were never in the bottom 10 in anything either. So you have this middle of the road bullpen, we'll call it. I don't view that as a failure. And even though it's a pretty sizable step back from their 2022, where they were in the top 10 and even borderline top 5 at certain points in the season. The reason why I don't view it as a failure is because they lost all those pieces. And I think that they proved that even with the loss of talent, again, similar conversation to the starting pitching staff, this coaching staff and this pitching development staff the Tigers have in place now has the ability to get the most out of people you don't expect. And Tyler Holton is obviously the biggest example of that in 2023. But I mean, Jason Foley was not 2023 Jason Foley in 2022, right? And Alex Lang had a ton of command issues, especially for that really brutal 4 to 6 week stretch there after May. But in the first couple of months of the season and in the last couple of months of the season was pretty darn effective. May, he was like one of the best relievers in baseball. So I think that raises the floor. I think there's some confidence that we can have going into the year. And again, this sounds very familiar and very similar to the starting pitcher conversation we had at the end of last week. But I think that it's the same, right? You have some confidence of, okay, even if 3 guys get hurt, there's some belief that they're going to be able to at least keep their head above water and have, a team ERA of a little bit over 4, like it was last year, right? You have some sort of confidence in their ability to not completely implode after like 2 injuries on the bullpen side of things. Let's talk about some individuals, because there's some individuals that I think could really, I don't want to say make or break, because again, I don't think the floor is like bottom 10 bullpen in baseball low. But I do think that there's some individuals that could make a massive difference if they hit versus not. Okay, we'll talk about all of those right after we talk about Jace Medical. Look, I know we talk about sports a lot on this show, but we need to talk about Jace Medical. Thankfully, given all the stuff that is happening in the world right now, and just wanting to be prepared in life, Jace Medical is there to help you do so. You can get the Jace case. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinuses, skin infections, amongst others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jacemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON, all one word, to get $20 off of your order. That's jacemedical.com and code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your order. All right, everybody, welcome back. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's Locked On's brand new 24/7 streaming channel. They have local members, right, from specific teams. They also have national analysts on Locked On as well. So go to YouTube and subscribe to the first ever 24/7 streaming sports channel. Okay, so we are talking about the bullpen here. Quite a few additions made in the pen this season, and also a lot of fringe guys, right? Guys that could make the roster on opening day, guys that couldn't, guys that maybe are going to start off in Toledo, but also could be prominent fixtures in the bullpen. There are a lot of names all in the running for this pen, and I think that that's why it varies so much. I mean, we can cut to the chase here. I think this bullpen has the ability to be a top 10 bullpen in the game of baseball. The glaring issue, and again, this is ceilings and floors, okay? I don't want to get this misconstrued of like, I'm guaranteeing the Tigers are, talent-wise, absolutely have a top 10 bullpen. Not what I'm saying. I'm saying at its best, I believe it has the potential to do so. It also has the potential to be similar to last year. But I think that that's close to the floor, maybe a little bit lower, but they did add some names. We'll talk about them in a second. The glaring issue with this bullpen is that, again, tying it back to what we were talking about earlier, there is a massive lack of a guaranteed highest leverage reliever. There isn't one. Now, that doesn't mean that one won't develop or come to fruition, or by May 1st, we're like, all right, well, so-and-so is going to get the 9th inning most nights because they have been closing the door. He's been doing well, et cetera, et cetera. That I hope that happens. That's the goal. that would mean that the Tigers would be in a position to have a really good bullpen this year. But as it stands in January, that does not exist. Alex Lang certainly is not a guy that I don't think this fan base is really oozing with confidence over. Jason Foley, I am the biggest Jason Foley fan breathing on planet Earth right now. Not your highest leverage reliever. He's a ground ball guy. Your highest leverage, go-to, biggest moment of the game reliever needs to be able to get swings and misses more consistently. Okay? Jason Foley, I think, can be your second highest leverage guy, and you can be a darn good ball club. Or more of a specialist guy, first out of the pen, etc. Foley is a weapon and a tool, but he should not be your highest leverage reliever. Andrew Chafin coming back. Struggled a little bit last year. I don't think he just steps in and is your closer. Even in 2022, he wasn't your highest leverage reliever. I don't know why he would be now, but he is a very valuable lefty to be added, obviously, right? Alex Faedo, more of a multi-innings guy. Bo Brisky, I don't think he's going into the season as your highest leverage reliever. Tyler Holton, fantastic year last year, right? I don't think he's going to have like a sub-2 ERA like he held on to for a large part of 2023. I think there's a lot of peripherals that kind of point to not necessarily that he got lucky. I don't like saying that people got lucky. The game of baseball is very, very hard. But There's some peripherals that suggest that his ERA is probably wasn't, it's difficult wording without using the word lucky. You get what I'm trying to say, that it probably is not going to be replicable. We'll put it that way. That being said, if he even puts up, and I said this a lot last season, right? If he even puts up 3 ERA baseball as a lefty out of the bullpen, this is still a massive win. Like, Tyler Holton has so much wiggle room. He could have a 3.5 ERA for all I care. It would be a massive. He was a waiver claim. He was a pickup. He was DFA'd by the Diamondbacks. You picked him up for nothing. Like, the fact that he is a fixture in this pen is nothing short of a massive accomplishment for this organization. So, and I don't think he's going to be like 4 ERA bad. I think he's going to be pretty darn good again, because he proved that he can be pretty darn good. But I don't think he's your highest leverage reliever on opening day. Alex Lang, we already talked about. Shelby Miller. You're paying Shelby Miller a little bit, some decent money. You brought him in from the outside, obviously. Had a great year last year. We talked about him. We broke him down a couple, whatever that signing was, week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now. Time is a construct. But I think that he's a guy that could be a multi-inning, even, back end of the bullpen guy, but I don't think he's guaranteed to be your highest leverage reliever. Reese Olson is probably either starting in Toledo or being a multi-inning reliever or in the rotation, depending on what happens. We'll see how that shakes out. Will Vest, not your highest leverage reliever. Brendan White, no. Joey Wentz, certainly not. And there you go. That's 40-man roster. Those are names on the 40. That's the relievers on the 40-man. So that is easily the most glaring hole. Now, the also important, I keep hitting my table and shaking the camera. I'm so sorry. I keep punching my computer. The other thing that's important to talk about here, though, is that in a similar conversation at the start of the show when talking about designated hitter, I think it's kind of similar with closer. I don't think that AJ Hinch is upset that there isn't a guaranteed closer. I don't think that Scott Harris is upset that there's not one guy that they're going to go to. Now, the misconception is that in today's day and age of baseball is that there's this battle between, traditional closers, quote unquote, and then this like by committee thing. And that's an old school versus a new school thing. No, that's not the case. What's actually happening is that some teams have one pitcher that is good enough against righties, lefties, no matter the leverage, no matter the inning, no matter what type of hitter is up, where he is the best choice in every situation. And obviously, if he's your best choice in every situation, he's going to get the ball in the highest leverage of situations. So it has the ability to be a marriage of both, where you have a quote unquote traditional closer, Clase, Duran, like you name it, right? There's certainly plenty left out there. But that's also because they are comfortably the best relievers on their team. So like, yes, but that's on purpose, right? Hopefully I'm articulating that well, but if this team doesn't have that, then they'll go somewhat quote unquote by committee, and they'll go a little bit more situation based. I think this bullpen can succeed and be fine given that. I'm really excited about Shelby Miller. Again, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago. I'm excited about Jason Foley for round 2. I think that he needs to make some adjustments. We need some more swings and misses. I also think that the sinker command got a little wary there at the end of the season. So we need to nip that in the bud. Alex Lang obviously has a lot to work on, all pretty much command based. I'm super pumped about Alex Faedo, though. I've been talking about this all offseason. I think Alex Faedo being the actual multi-inning swingman reliever in the middle of your bullpen can be so valuable. I'm so excited for that. I think he can bring immense value. My favorite reliever alive, right? Miguel Diaz has a legitimate chance to make this team again. He's still on the 40. I believe he's out of options. So if he does not make the team out of spring training, then there's a chance they lose him permanently and they have to waive him. But we'll see. Maybe he has a 0 ERA in spring training again. I really like Miguel Diaz, not as your highest leverage guy, but certainly as a piece to this bullpen. This bullpen is riddled, just full of guys who could, at their best, be 6th, 7th, even 8th inning relievers. And that's great. They just need somebody or not, I guess. Like I was going to say, they need somebody to take over that, guaranteed top end 9th inning role. Maybe they don't, right? Maybe this coaching staff is just totally fine with the by committee thing. They don't really care if there's one guy doing it all, and they're just going to play situationally. I think how the bullpen is managed from innings 7 to 9 is genuinely one of the least talked about and yet most fascinating storylines for this baseball team this upcoming year. The biggest factor for the team in 2024 is the offense. We will talk about that later in the week. We'll do best and worst case scenario for the offense. We will talk very in depth about these players as we get closer and closer to the season. That is easily the biggest like X factor, right? But in terms of just like under the radar, not talked about things that are going to hold a lot of weight, I think this is maybe the biggest one. You have a ton of dudes who could be a 7th inning reliever on a good team, an 8th inning reliever on a good team. How on earth are you going to manage 7 through 9? Those final 9 outs are going to be fascinating in spring training and in the early part of the regular season. Okay. As far as just the ceiling, again, we talked about, I think this could be a top 10 bullpen. I believe in the staff. I believe in the coaching. I believe in the talent that they have there. This isn't, right? I feel like this is kind of a happy medium in between 2022 and 2023. 2022, you had a ton of talent, not a very good team. It kind of got wasted. 2023, you got rid of all that talent to try to make the rest of the team better, and you still kept your head above water, but you took a big step back. I think this year is a year where you can kind of rebound and be somewhere in the middle there, right? That 12 to 9 kind of bullpen in baseball range, I think is very feasible if you want to go middle of what I believe the ceiling and floor could be. Now, if everything goes wrong, what does that look like? That looks like there isn't anybody who takes the baton in highest leverage, and everybody they try there sucks, and nobody can close the door, and we just have a bunch of low leverage relievers on our team. Within the realm of possibility, not impossible. I want to make that clear. I don't think it's likely. I think there's enough talent on here and enough opportunity. I don't foresee like 8 different dudes who I'm somewhat confident in all crumbling in the highest of pressure, but it's on the table. 2022 was worst case scenario for offense. We have to bring up what worst case scenario would be. It has happened too recently to ignore. In terms of best case scenario, I think that you either have one person take over as that highest leverage, I'm repeating myself, or the committee works really well and you can just play matchups and you have multiple people who can be your highest leverage. So you're comfortable and confident no matter what the opponent's batting order looks like going into the bottom of the 9th of a 1-run game. We'll talk a lot more in spring training about this bullpen. This is one of my favorite storylines of the 2024 season, is going to be how this is managed, who's going to make the team out of spring, who's going to start off in Toledo, who's going to maybe be looked at as more of a starter, more of a reliever. And as I said, how the last 9 outs are going to be managed, I think is fascinating. Okay, cool. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Wednesday. Like I said, I want to do kind of ceiling and floor, best and worst case scenario for the offense. I also want to do the defense, and then I want to do off-season recap kind of stuff before. And then next thing you know, we're going to open our eyes and pitchers and catchers are going to be close to reporting. That's a beautiful thing. I miss baseball dearly. Thank you for the continued support through the offseason, even kind of the quote-unquote dead part of the offseason like we're in right now. I appreciate you all greatly. All right, we'll be back on Wednesday. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.